Namaste. Let us begin our class for today. So today we are going to review about the properties of semiconductor. So it's a kind of preview that we will go through. But before we go through the preview, let us discuss about how do we get the semiconductors. So first of all, bulk semi-crystal growth. So it is very important to have a single crystal substrate, whether it is silicon or gallium arsenide. We have to have a single crystal silicon, and it is also called electronic grade silicon (EGS). Now, IC growth that we see today is due to the pure single crystal silicon. It is very important to obtain a pure single crystal silicon. So there are two things here. One is the purity and another is a single crystal. So of course amorphous and polycrystalline silicon has their application, but single crystal is most important as far as electronic devices are concerned. So the starting material for silicon is silicon dioxide, which is found in the nature, and it is reduced at 1800 degrees Celsius with carbon in an arc furnace. So basically SiO2 reacts with carbon to form silicon with carbon monoxide. Now the silicon that we have obtained is called metallurgical grade silicon. So metallurgical grade silicon has around 1 ppm of impurities. Now if you recall what we did in our previous class, we calculated for FCC crystal we found out there are around 5 into 10 raised to power 22 atoms per cubic centimeter. So if you have 1 ppm of impurity, so this is 1 part per million, so that means impurity concentration is around 5 into 10 raised to power 22 minus 6, so that becomes how much? 16, right? So that is the impurity. These are the impurities of iron, heavy metal impurities. They are found in metallurgical grade silicon. Now for electronic grade silicon we need further pure silicon. So that purity is obtained by fractional distillation. Now fractional distillation is used to obtain electronic grade silicon. So what is done here, silicon which is metallurgical grade, we react it with HCl to form silane, SiHCl3, and hydrogen gas. So this SiHCl3 is distilled. Now fortunately other metal impurities, they also react with HCl to form their chloride like FeCl or iron aluminum chloride, and they have different condensation temperatures. So they condense at different temperature, so we can easily select silicon from this silicon HCl3, so which is again it reacts with H2 to form electronic grade silicon. Now electronic grade silicon has around 1 part per billion, so that means impurity will be around 5 into 10 raised to power 22 minus 9, so that is around 13. So this is the typical impurity of electronic grade silicon. Now the method that is used to get a crystal from this pure silicon. So previous slide basically described how to get a pure silicon. Now this slide describes how to get a single crystal silicon. So that pure silicon or electronic grade silicon is heated to the melting point in a container. So this container is called basically crucible. This is a technical name for the container. It is made up of certain material uh, because container also have to have a property that it does not react with the silicon. And then what we do, now this is in liquid phase, so we have to have a crystal here, right? And that crystal is actually dipped in this molten silicon, and it is slowly pulled up. So while it is slowly pulled up, um, this molten silicon attaches to this single crystal and it solidifies. Now while it is solidifying, it basically arranges them in such a way that they follow the pattern of the crystal. So what we get a single crystal silicon rod. So this becomes a big rod. Usually it's quite high, it's quite heavy, bulky. So this single crystal basically provides a template, and then this liquid silicon attaches to a template and form the silicon crystal. Now there is another thing is there, that when it is raised, it is slowly rotated. Now rotation has two purpose. It basically stir the melt, and it averages out the temperature, so that solution is more homogeneous. Now while making a crystal, you can add some impurity also. That is done basically to obtain different types of substrate. You can have a p-type silicon substrate or n-type silicon substrate. So accordingly the impurities are added there. There is a coefficient called distribution coefficient, Kd, which is basically the ratio of impurity concentration in solid divided by impurity concentration in liquid. So while it is solidifying, so in this solid that is solidifying here, impurity concentration is Cs, here it is Cl. Now of course Cs will be less than Cl, right? So to get certain impurity concentration, let's say X, you have to have more amount of impurity in the liquid or molten silicon, right? So let's say Kd is 1 by 2, so that means Cs by Cl will be 1 by 2. So to obtain impurity X, you have to have impurity concentration 2x in the liquid. And again, this distribution coefficient depends on the material, the type of material, the impurity, temperature, growth rate. So all these are factors in determining the distribution coefficient. But once you know the distribution coefficient, you can find out how much impurity we should mix in the liquid to get a desired doping for the single crystal silicon. Okay, once you have a single crystal silicon as a substrate or a wafer, we have to make a device. So that device making process involves epitaxial growth. Now epitaxial growth is very specialized thing. What it does basically, it's a technique of growing single crystal silicon, or for that matter any other semiconductor material. So it's basically a single crystal layer on the substrate wafer. Now there are two types of epitaxy. One is called homoepitaxy, other is heteroepitaxy. But remember, for both the epitaxy, the crystal structure has to be similar. If the crystal structure is different, then there will be a lot of defects. So in homoepitaxy, the substrate and the layer that we are growing, so let's say this is a substrate and this is a layer we are growing, so layer and this is substrate. So they have same material, so because it is same material, so they will have same lattice constant, so it's not SU, right? So you can grow layer as thick as you want. But for heteroepitaxy, if you are growing a different material, there will be inherently some lattice mismatch. So lattice mismatch means their lattice constant will be different. You see on right side there is a graph occur which shows which relate a band gap with the lattice constant. So you can see here aluminum arsenide, gallium arsenide, indium arsenide, aluminum antimonide, gallium phosphide. They are quite different lattice constants. Then you have this indium phosphide here, gallium arsenide here. So so to grow particular material, we have to get it close. So it is not that arbitrarily you can grow any material on any substrate. No, they have to be lattice matched, at least within the reasonable limit, so that strain is less. Strain is basically arising from the difference in the lattice constant. So so for even for heteroepitaxy, where you are going different material, so the substrate and layer, they are of different material, they have to have similar, not exactly same, but they have to have similar lattice structure. So this is called basically pseudomorphic. So they are basically not entirely lattice matched, but there is some strain is there. So but the layer adjusts itself. So when the layer is adjusting itself to the lattice constant of substrate, obviously there will be strain there. So if the gap interatomic distance is more in substrate, then layer will be stressed out, right? So there will be kind of tensile strain. If the interatomic gap in substrate is less, then this layer will be compressed. So we call it in plane compressively strained layer. So different kind of strains are there basically, and they give rise to critical layer thickness. So if there is a more strain, then you cannot grow a thicker layer. You can grow a some small thickness layer. So that thickness depends on the strain, and that thickness up to which layer does not have any defect, that is called critical layer thickness. So that means if you grow a layer which is more thick than the critical layer thickness, then there will be defects in the layer. And what kind of defects? Misfit dislocation. So that means after a few period, there may be one atomic row may be missing, right? So that's called strain relaxation. So strain may be relaxed in that fashion. Now there are different methods to do the epitaxial growth. There is a chemical vapor deposition, liquid phase epitaxy, molecular beam epitaxy. Here you should note that there is a slight difference between deposition and epitaxy. Epitaxy is usually used for single crystal, and deposition is a more general term. So you can deposit on polycrystalline or amorphous material also, but for single crystal the term we use is the epitaxy. Okay, so now we will go ahead and review the properties of semiconductor. Now the properties of the semiconductor depend on the constituent atom, and that constituent atom usually semiconductors, they come from group 4. So this is group 4. You can see here 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. Now how do we decide which group? It is decided by the outer orbital electrons. So in group 4 there are 4 electrons in the outer orbital. Okay, so in periodic table usually semiconductors are found in group 4. So you have here silicon, you have germanium here. Now there is another possibility to get a semiconductor or average of 4 electrons in the valence band if you move one to right and one to left. So to left there is a group 3, to right there is a group 5, and you can select atom from group 3, atom from group 5. So you have gallium here, arsenic here. So this gallium arsenide will be one compound semiconductor. But remember, gallium itself is not a semiconductor, right? But gallium arsenide is a semiconductor, or aluminum arsenide is a semiconductor, or aluminum antimonide, indium antimonide, indium arsenide. These are basically semiconductors. So you have group 3, group 5, they are called 3,5 semiconductors, and their average electrons in the valence band will be 3 plus 5 divided by 2, so that is 4. Then you can go ahead further, you can go to group 6 here and group 2 here. So you have zinc selenide, right? So that will also be a semiconductor called group 2,6 semiconductor. Again the average is 4, and each group of semiconductors, they have their use basically. So for example, silicon is used for electronic chips, as all of you know. Gallium arsenide or group 3,5, they are used for light emitting applications, lasers, LEDs. Then group 2,6, there are other applications, right? Some solar cell application. So there are so many applications for different semiconductors. Now what are the properties of these semiconductor that are useful? So what makes them useful? So if you see here, there are two very important and basic properties. One is called band gap, other is intrinsic carrier density. So they are not entirely unrelated, rather they are related. So you can see a typical semiconductor here. This is basically axis is energy, and below is valence band, and above is conduction band, and this lowest energy of the conduction band is called EC, or conduction band in edge energy. Highest energy of the valence band is called EV, or valence band edge energy, and the difference of the two is called band gap, EG. So usually holes are found in this energy below EV, electrons are found with energy above EC. So for silicon, all of you know that band gap is around 1.1 electron volt. For germanium it is 0.66 electron volt. So band gap is less for germanium. For gallium arsenide, band gap is around 1.42 electron volt. And then intrinsic carrier density is around 10 raised to power 10 for silicon. So this is not correct. This is for silicon, 10 raised to power 10. I will correct it. For germanium is around 2 into 10 raised to power 13. So you can write 2 into 10 raised to power. So there is a product sign here. 2 into 10 raised to power 13. For gallium arsenide is 10 raised to power 6. So you notice here, if band gap is more, intrinsic carrier concentration is less. If band gap is less, intrinsic carrier concentration is more. Why? Because now these are the properties at room temperature. So at room temperature we know that energy will be order of kT. So electrons in the valence band, they will have the ability to acquire the thermal energy and go to the conduction band. So very small amount. You notice here is very small amount. For example, if you remember silicon, it is 10 raised to power 10. Now this number may seem big, but if you look at silicon, how many atoms are there per cubic centimeter? 5 into 10 raised to power 22. And what is the intrinsic carrier concentration? 10 raised to power 10. So that means out of 10 raised to power 12 atoms, only one atom is giving an electron to the conduction band. So it's very less. It's not big, it's very less. So this is a typical at room temperature. But if you lower the band gap, as you see in germanium, it rises to 10 to the power 13, right? Now atom density may be slightly different, but definitely order of 10 to the power 22 only. Okay. Now, how do we get these carriers? So if you look here, there are various mechanisms going on in the semiconductor. One is of course generation by thermal excitation. Electron can go from valence band to the conduction band. Another is recombination. So electron in the conduction band can come down to the valence band and fill a gap. Now this gap where is no electron is called hole, right? Now there are two types of semiconductor. One is direct gap, other is indirect gap. So in direct gap, electron can directly jump from the conduction band to valence band. In indirect gap, what electron usually does, it comes to certain energy level and then again come to the valence band. So that is indirect. Now direct gap, usually they have the possibility of emitting light. For example, gallium arsenide or many 3-5 semiconductors. In indirect gap, the electron make a transition via certain energy level. So usually they emit heat. Now heat is basically a lattice vibration. So that's why all of you know that silicon is not a good emitter of light. Now, what are the properties of these electrons in the conduction band? What are the properties of holes in the valence band? How these electrons and holes move when a field is applied? If you apply electric field, how they will move, right? Now, is it same as the free electron or they move in different ways? So there is a quantity called mobility. What about the thermal conductivity? Now, is there a electric field at which electrons can break the bond and you have large number of carriers? Now, when these electrons are in the crystal, do they reflect the same mass? Mass of electron is 9.1 into 10 to the power minus 31 kg. So is it the same mass in the crystal? They experience same mass or different mass? What happens? Let's see. Now, if you see a free electron here, you apply a force, right? How do you apply? You apply a field here, E. So force will be minus Q times E. And then force will give rise to acceleration, right? So F will be M times A. Now here M is M naught. And M naught is 9.1 10 to the power minus 31 kg for free electron. And charge is 1.6 10 to the power minus 19. So from this you can easily get acceleration will be minus QE divided by M naught, right? So that means acceleration is finite. So that means velocity will keep on increasing, right? Will it become infinite or it will stop somewhere? Of course, as electron move faster, it will experience some drag. Now drag could be due to other electrostatic forces or whatever mechanism may be there, but obviously velocity cannot be infinite. So it will achieve certain velocity, right? So that will give rise to certain terminal velocity, and then this velocity will depend on the field, right? It will depend on the field. So this proportionality constant you can cite V is equal to mu times E, right? And that mu term is called mobility. Now you compare this free electron with the electron in the crystal. So in crystal, what happens? Let's say you have just pure silicon, right? So these nucleus are there, right? And they are positively charged. So they will give some kind of potential, right? Some potential well type of thing, right? So when electron is moving through this crystal, it is experiencing periodic potential. So now we are not going to solve for crystal potential itself, right? What we are worried about, we want to apply a field and we want to see what will be the current that will flow. So if we apply a field, what current will flow? What will be the velocity of this electron? So what we do to account for this periodic potential in the crystal itself, through quantum mechanical ways that we will discuss in next lecture, we have a concept of effective mass. So we have effective mass and we have drift velocity. So for example, in crystal, for silicon, effective mass of electron is 1.18 times m naught. So it is basically more. So that means electron in the silicon crystal is heavy. That means when you apply a field, it will move slowly compared to a free electron. Whole mass is less, is 0.81 m naught. Similarly for gallium arsenide, electron mass is very small. You see it's 0.066 m naught. So that means mobility in gallium arsenide will be much more compared to silicon, and the hole is 0.52 m net. So this is the difference between free electron and the electron in the crystal, because in crystal electron experiences periodic potential and that affects its mobility to respond to the external electric field. Now you can draw energy versus momentum diagram for free electron, right? Now energy is half mv square, which can also be written as p square by 2m. So if you draw energy versus momentum, you will get a parabola because E is p square by 2m. So which is parabolic and it's symmetric around plus p and minus p. And what is the force on electron? Force is derivative of the momentum, dp by dt. Now you can compare this with the electron in the crystal. So for crystal electron, again you can write E is equal to half mv square, but here mass is now effective mass, or you can write p square by 2m. Now owing to the scientist Planck, here we have momentum which is quantized and is called h bar k. Here h bar is reduced Planck constant and k is the wave vector. So because electron shows dual characters, electron particle nature as well as wave nature, so due to wave nature it will show certain wave like behavior. So for example, electron is moving certain speed which is quite high, it will show certain wavelength, and then k is 2 pi by lambda wave number, right? Where lambda is the wavelength of the electron. So the momentum is E is h bar k. So here again you have E k diagram, it's also called E k diagram or energy momentum diagram, and the force will be dp by dt. Now P is h bar k, so it will be dk by dt, h bar times dk by dt. So this is just a comparison of free electron and crystal electron, and this will form the basis of band structure. Why? Because this is the energy versus momentum or energy versus wave vector curve for the electron. You can guess the similar type of curve will be valid for holes also, but it will be inverted. Why? Because if they have certain velocity, their energy will be less because they are actually holes, right? So this is the absence of electron. You can see here. For example, you see here, this is the conduction band and this is the valence band. So conduction band energy is p square by 2m. Now there is a minimum energy below which is a forbidden band gap. So you can write energy of electron is minimum energy of the conduction band plus p square by 2m. So this is basically kind of fixed potential energy, and then this is the kinetic energy. Similarly for holes, this is kind of fixed potential energy, and then this is p square by 2m is the kinetic energy. So because they are bound, their energy actually decreases with the wave vector. Now there are several materials here, several semiconductor materials here, such as silicon, gallium arsenide, right, indium phosphide. Now what is so special about silicon? Why we see that silicon is most prominent for most technology, for the devices that we see here? Why? First of all, it is easily available. Silicon dioxide is sand you can find anywhere, right? But another interesting thing is about the native oxide. Now what is the role of native oxide? If you look at any semiconductor, right, inside the bulk everything is okay because all the atoms are bonded to neighbors, but at the surface not all atoms are bonded, so there will be dangling bonds. Now these dangling bonds are actually defects, right, because these bonds are free, so they will try to attach to some other foreign atom, could be impurity, anything, right? So they are actually defects. Now silicon has very interesting property. Its native oxide, silicon dioxide, it ties up the dangling bonds and it passivates the surface, so that these bonds are actually bonded to silicon dioxide without any defect. So that basically takes care of the defects while terminating the silicon. So you have a nice silicon and silicon dioxide interface without defects. So that makes it very popular. Other semiconductors are used when silicon is not suitable. For example, light emitting devices, lasers, LEDs. So the silicon band gap is also 1.1. So some other material they have wide band gap or some smaller band gap. So depending on application, silicon is the first preference. But when silicon does not work, then we go to other materials. So summary of the first part: electrons in the conduction band, they are called holes. They are called electrons. Holes in the valence band. Valence band. They are free to move about within the crystal, and they can often be treated as Newtonian particles with an effective mass. Now there are two terms here, please remember. One is band structure, other is energy band diagram. Now band structure is basically EK diagram. It's a plot of energy versus momentum, H bar K. So it's EK diagram. So that's why you see those curves here, right? But energy band diagram is the plot of the bottom of the conduction band and the top of the valence band with position. So this is energy versus position, X or whatever. So we have discussed the concept of band gap and intrinsic carrier concentration. Okay. Now the interesting property of semiconductor is the ability to dope it. So for example, for simple silicon we have 10 raised to power 10 electron hole pairs per cubic centimeter. So of course its conductivity will be very small, but you have the ability to dope it. So that means you can vary this doping from 10 raised to power 10 to 10 raised to power 20, right? So that means the conductivity can be varied over a magnitude or over a range of 10 raised to power 10. So there's a huge improvement in conductivity. Now how it is achieved? You can dope it. So there are two possibilities, because these are group 4 atoms. You can dope with group 5 or group 3. So when you dope with group 3 atom, for example boron or indium, what will happen? It will have one less electron. So it only has 3 electrons. So there is no electron here, so this one is an empty state is there, right? Now this can take up an electron, right, and then create a hole here. So that means it will give rise to a hole. Another is you can have group 5 dopant such as phosphorus, arsenic, and what will have, they will have 5 electrons. So 1, 2, 3, 4 and 5. So 4 are for bonding, 1 is relatively free, so it can easily give away that electron, right, and that electron can move freely. Now the bonding energy of this loosely connected electron or this loose hole is order of 0.1 electron volt. So that means it's very free, right? So can you recall what is kT at room temperature? kT by Q is around 26 millivolt. So that is 0.026 milli, energy will be milli electron volt, right? Energy will be kT, energy is kT, right, and potential is kT by Q. So 0.02. Now this is when there is a band gap of 1.1, you get 10^10 number of dopants. But if you have this loosely bound electron of 0.1 electron volt with the given thermal energy, it can easily go to the conduction band, right? Or electron from the valence band can easily go to this impurity state of group 3 atom. So that enables for the carriers to move and to get a large carrier concentration. So for example, let us do some rough calculation for binding energy. We can recall that for hydrogen atom, binding energy is given by m0 q4 divided by 2 times 4 pi epsilon naught h bar square electron volt, and that is minus 13.6. So this is our first energy state, right? So you can compare these impurity atom, group 5 atom, like similar to hydrogen atom, not exactly, but but similar to that. So it has one electron which is loosely bound. So this loosely bound electron is relatively free. So if this loosely bound electron is there, what will be the energy of this electron? So if you compare this one here, m0. So now in crystal, this m0 changes by effective mass, right? So this is around 1.18 m0, right? Then q remains unchanged, 4 pi epsilon naught, right? So epsilon naught is the permittivity of free space, but in silicon crystal it has dielectric constant of 11.8. So this epsilon naught will be multiplied by 11.8 and rest remains same. So this basically becomes 13.6 times 1.18 divided by 11.8 square. So that gives you around 0.025 electron volt. So this is not exact value, but it gives you an indication that it's much less compared to the band gap. Okay, so here Mn is 0.26 m0. So that is for this is for, let me see, this is, so here the mass is basically the conduction band electron effective mass. So you see here this is slightly different than what we discussed previously, 1.18. That is because there are two types of effective masses. One is density of state effective mass. One is density of state effective mass, DOS, and another is conductivity effective mass. So these two terms we will discuss when we discuss about the band structure. For now we can take this value 0.26 m0, and that gives around 0.025, which is not the exact value, but gives us indication that what is the binding energy of the extra electron. Now this situation is very similar to hydrogen atom, because other electrons are already accounted through the band and only this one electron is remaining, right? So it will be loosely bound and other electrons have cancelled the effect of nucleus by skinning effect. So you can say it's like one positive charge and one electron situation. So we can roughly use this model to estimate the binding energy. Now similar thing can be done for the hole also, so that binding energy will also be similar. So now if you draw the energy band diagram for n type doping, let's say doping is 10 raised to power 17 per cubic centimeter, and this is the binding energy that we discussed, EB, or you can also say this is the ECD. ECD is basically the energy level or the energy difference between the conduction band edge and the defect. So this is the difference between conduction and the defect level, so ECD, and that is around 0.05 electron volt. So at room temperature they can easily give away the electron from this defect level to the conduction band because it's very near. So that means number of electrons will be much more than number of holes, right? Because there is a source of electron here in the form of this defect level. So if all the impurity atoms are ionized, then the electron concentration will be same as the doping density, 10 raised to power 17, and then from that you can know what will be the hole concentration. So that will be accordingly reduced. You might remember there is a law called Np is equal to Ni square. So if electron increases, holes have to reduce. So if you recall the situation, that number of atoms per cubic centimeter in silicon crystal is around 5 into 10 raised to power 22 per cubic centimeter, and the doping has to be between these two terms. So if doping is less than Ni, it does not make any sense, because the number of carriers that doping is giving is less than Ni, so it will not make any sense. So doping has to be more than Ni. So that is 10 raised to power 10, and you cannot dope more than number of atoms, because then whole crystal will be made up of dopant rather than the silicon. So Nd is usually between Ni or N atoms, and there has to be some margin. So you can say it's margin of 10 raised to power 2. So if every 100 atom you have one atom, you can go to 10 raised to power 20 something, right? And similarly for lower limit we will use 10 raised to power 12. So typically the doping is between 10 raised to power 12 to 10 raised to power 20, and of course further doping is limited by the solid solubility limit. So that is another consideration that has to be taken care of while doping the silicon, or for that matter any material. While we are doping, we have to take care of the limits. So when this donor ionizes, it gives electron in the conduction band, it reduces the number of holes in the valence band, and it forms a defect energy level very close to the conduction band edge. Now you recall this is energy band diagram, right? So energy versus position, right, is not EK diagram, is not band structure. Now what about p doping? It is very similar. It will, for p doping, it will form an energy level here close to the valence band, so it can basically easily give a hole here, right? So taking electron means giving a hole to the valence band. So that will be the case for valence band, and then its energy level will be called the defect here and the valence band, right? So the valence band energy level and the defect here. Now this defect is basically an acceptor, this defect is a donor. So ECD is the donor defect level and the conduction band edge, the energy difference between them, and EVA is the valence band edge and the acceptor defect level. Now, um, typically these ECD and EAB are order of 0.1 electron volt, right? But for some cases, for some dopants, these energy levels, defect energy levels are much more than kT. So the ECD and EAB are much more than kT, right? So then of course it is difficult for electron to jump across, right, to increase the number of electrons or number of holes, or you can say these energy levels are at a depth, right? They are deeply into the band gap arena, right? So these are called deep energy levels, deep donor defect level or deep acceptor defect level, right? And they do not contribute much to the electron hole concentration. Only the shallow donors and acceptors, they contribute to the electron hole concentration, because at room temperature they are fully ionized, whereas deep donors and acceptors are partially ionized. So if you dope with 10 to the power 17, not all will be ionized, but some of them will be ionized. Now if we change the temperature, what happen? So that means we dope a silicon with 10 to the 17 or 18 and we change the temperature, what will happen? If you decrease the temperature, what happens? Thermal energy will reduce, kT will reduce. If you increase the temperature, thermal energy will increase. Now we have to compare the thermal energy kT with two things. One is band gap, another is the difference of the energy between the band edge and the defect energy level. So it could be ECD or EAB, right, between acceptor and the valence band. So at low temperature we have phenomena called carrier freeze out. That means thermal energy is so low that they cannot even jump this 0.1 electron volt, EAB or ECD, right? This is EAB and this is ECD, right? So they cannot even jump this one, right? So this is called carrier freeze out. That means all the donors are not ionized. So Nd is not equal to Na plus, Nd plus, or Na is not equal to Na minus. So this is called carrier freeze out. So that means number of carrier will be less. In the middle temperature range, they are extrinsic and doping plays a role. But if you again go to high temperature, then kT is so high that your Ni will increase, right? So if Ni is more than the doping, right, then again it will become intrinsic. So at low temperature there is carrier freeze out, at the middle temperature it behaves like extrinsic, and at again high temperature it behaves like intrinsic, because intrinsic carrier concentration has increased. So you can see this plot, N by Nd, the dopant concentration. If you look at 0 Kelvin, there is a carrier freeze out. So again electron concentration is reduced. At middle temperature, it is again limited by the doping. So that means Ni is less than Nd. So here Nd is more than Ni. In intrinsic, Ni is more than Nd. So all the dopants are ionized, but Ni is more than Nd. So again it becomes intrinsic. So here I have described more about it. KT is much less than Eg, KT is less than ECD. For middle region, KT is again much less than Eg, but KT is comparable to ECD. So this extrinsic region dominate. Here KT is less than EG and much larger than ECD. So again it is intrinsic here, right? So the first term determines Ni, second terms determine contribution by Nd, right? So you can say the donors that are ionized. At 0 Kelvin, silicon will be semiconductor or insulator? Correct, it will be insulator, because it has a band gap and there is no thermal energy for electron to jump, so Ni will be 0, right? So Ni is basically kind of increasing from here like this. So this region again this is dominated by the dopant, so maybe up to here you can use it, right? So beyond this doping becomes meaningless. So that means this device will not function as desired, right? So this is the reason of operation of the device. Okay, so here I have written, so you can read when in after the lecture. So in this region there are only partially ionized donors. That's what first para says. Second one, many extrinsic carriers due to doping, but few intrinsic carriers. And here lot of intrinsic carriers, right, for high temperature. Okay, summary. So I will summarize this. By doping we replace few atoms of semiconductor with foreign atoms from different column. Now ionized dopant, they produce electrons in the conduction band, the donors, or holes in the valence band, acceptors. At high temperature, intrinsic carrier concentration overwhelms the extrinsic carriers and device ceases to operate, or basically it becomes intrinsic again. So if you want to operate a device at high temperature, what should we do? If you want to operate at high temperature, what should we do? We should make sure that intrinsic carrier concentration does not increase, right? So that can be done by increasing the band gap, right? So what we do? We use materials with large band gap, such as silicon carbide, gallium nitride. They have around 3 or more electron volt band gap. So carrier concentration versus temperature characteristic has 3 regions: freeze out, extrinsic and intrinsic region. And at low temperatures semiconductor become insulator. Now I will give you a problem, right? Let's say you consider gallium arsenide crystal and you dope it with silicon. Now will it be N type or P type? Please think about it. So you have this gallium arsenide crystal here. So it's a zinc blende structure. So let's say you have gallium here at all the corners, right? Then at all the faces also, front face, bottom face, top face, back face, left face, right face. So total 6 face, 1 2 3 4 5. This 6th one, bottom up, left, right, front and back maybe. Okay, then there are let me use different color. So again there are 4 atoms in the body itself, right, at 1/4 quarter distance, and these you can say these are arsenic atoms, right? Now silicon atom can be, we can use another color. So let's say silicon is this color, right? Now there is 2 possibility. It can occupy either gallium site or it can occupy arsenic site. Now if it occupies gallium site, so gallium has 3 electrons, silicon has 4 electrons, so there is 1 electron extra, right? So it will behave as donor. Arsenic has 5 electrons, silicon has 4, so if it occupies arsenic site, it will act as acceptor, right? So silicon occupying gallium site will act as donor, right? So that will be n-type dopant. Silicon occupying arsenic site will act as acceptor, so that will be p-type. So now what such type of dopants are called? They are called neither n-type nor p-type, right? Of course you can control which site they can occupy depending on the epitaxy or doping mechanism. They are called amphoteric dopant. Amphoteric dopants. So with that I close this lecture. Please feel free to ask any questions. I will go live now on MS Teams, so we can have some discussion, and meanwhile you can also try to solve the problems given as assignment 1, whose solution you have to upload on one page sheet only. Don't write too much, maybe just a key equation and the numerical value, and you upload it as a PDF. Thank you very much.